I was seated in the back row of my own husband's funeral, not in the front with family, not beside my son. In the back, like a stranger who'd wandered in off the street. And that's exactly how my daughter-in-law Vanessa wanted it. I'm Valerie Donovan, 62 years old, and I spent 5 years caring for my husband Thomas as Alzheimer's disease slowly erased the man I'd loved for 39 years. 5 years of bathing him when he forgot how. 5 years of feeding him when he couldn't remember what a spoon was for. 5 years of holding him through the terrifying nights when he didn't know where he was or who I was or why he was so afraid. Thomas died 3 weeks ago at home in our bed in Auburn Gresham on the south side of Chicago. He was 64 years old. The disease had taken everything from him by the end. His memories, his words, his ability to recognize our son, Anthony. But he died in the house we'd bought together in 1988, in the bedroom where we'd raised our family, with me holding his hand. That should have been enough. Should have been the ending to a love story that lasted 4 decades. But my daughter-in-law had other ideas about how this story should be told. And today at Thomas's funeral, she was making sure her version was the only one anyone heard. If you're watching this, please subscribe and let me know what city you're watching from. Because what I'm about to share isn't a story about inheritance or revenge or even justice. It's a story about what happens when caregiving breaks a family apart, when devotion looks like isolation, when keeping promises costs you everything. Let me take you back to March 2024, to the day my world ended and my daughter-in-law decided I didn't deserve to grieve properly. The funeral was at Fellowship Baptist Church, where Thomas and I had been members for 28 years. The same church where we dedicated Anthony as a baby, where Thomas had served as a deacon before the disease made that impossible, where I taught Sunday school until I couldn't anymore because taking care of Thomas required every hour I had. I arrived early, 30 minutes before the service started. I wanted time to sit with Thomas one last time before they closed the casket, wanted to say the private goodbye that only a wife of 39 years deserves. But when I walked into the church, Vanessa was already there, my daughter-in-law, 36 years old, hospital social worker. The woman who'd spent the last 2 years of Thomas's life trying to convince everyone that I was an unfit caregiver, that my husband belonged in a memory care facility instead of at home with me. She was standing near the casket talking to the funeral director, wore a black dress that was appropriate but somehow felt like a costume, like she was playing the role of grieving daughter-in-law rather than actually grieving. When she saw me, her face hardened. "Valerie." "Vanessa." I moved toward the casket. "I'd like a few minutes alone with Thomas." "The service starts in 30 minutes. There's no time for that. I'm his wife. I'm asking for 5 minutes. And I'm the one who planned this funeral, who made all the arrangements while what were you doing exactly?" I felt the words like a slap. I was sitting with my husband's body until the funeral home came. I was calling family. I was grieving. "You were isolating, like you've been doing for 5 years. The funeral director cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Ladies, perhaps?" "It's fine." Vanessa's smile was tight. "Valerie can have her moment. But make it quick. Anthony will be here soon, and I don't want him upset before the service." She walked away. I approached Thomas's casket alone. They'd dressed him in his navy suit, the one he'd worn to Anthony's wedding 8 years ago, back when Thomas could still dress himself, still knew what day it was, still recognized his own son. I touched his hand. Cold. Wrong. Thomas had always run warm, had always been the one to warm my cold feet at night. Now his hand was cold and still, and nothing like the man I'd known. "I'm sorry, baby," I whispered. "Sorry for everything that came after. Sorry our son couldn't understand why I needed to keep you home. Sorry Vanessa made everything so hard. But I kept my promise. I took care of you until the end, just like I said I would." People started arriving. Church members who remembered Thomas before, who'd watched him decline over 5 years, who'd stopped visiting when it got too hard to see him that way. They nodded at me, offered quiet condolences, but nobody sat in the front row. That row was reserved for family. My son Anthony arrived with Vanessa. He looked exhausted. 39 years old but looking older. Grief and guilt did that to a person. He saw me in the back row and started toward me. Vanessa grabbed his arm, whispered something. Anthony hesitated, then nodded. They sat in the front row. The row where I should have been, the row reserved for immediate family. My sister Joan slipped in beside me. "Val, why are you back here? You should be up front." Vanessa made the arrangements. "Valerie, he was your husband. I know what he was. I know who took care of him every single day for 5 years. I don't need to sit in a special row to prove that." But even as I said it, I felt something break inside. Because it did matter. Being acknowledged mattered. Being treated like Thomas's widow instead of some distant relative mattered. The service started. Pastor Williams spoke about Thomas, about his 35 years with the Postal Service, about his dedication to the church, about his love for his family. He mentioned me once. Thomas is survived by his devoted wife Valerie. Devoted. One word. 39 years of marriage. 5 years of caregiving. Reduced to one word in a eulogy my daughter-in-law had probably written. Then Anthony stood to speak. My son. My only child. He walked to the podium with notes Vanessa had probably helped him write. "My father was a good man," Anthony began. His voice shook. He worked hard, loved his family, and in his final years, he suffered. Alzheimer's is a cruel disease. It takes everything. Memory, dignity, self. He paused. Looked at Vanessa. She nodded encouragingly. My father needed care that was beyond what any one person could provide. Professional care. Medical supervision. The kind of support you find in memory care facilities designed for this disease. My stomach dropped. He was doing this. At his father's funeral, he was making a statement about my choices. He didn't get that care, Anthony continued. He stayed at home. And while I know my mother did her best, I also know that Dad's final years could have been different. Easier. With less suffering, if we'd made different choices. We. He said we, but he meant me. Meant the choice I'd made to keep Thomas at home. The promise I'd kept even when it cost me everything. I hope my father is at peace now, Anthony finished, free from the disease that took him from us. And I hope we can all learn from what happened, that sometimes love means letting go, letting professionals handle what we can't. He sat down. Vanessa squeezed his hand, whispered something that made him nod. Several people in the congregation murmured agreement. I heard someone behind me say, "He's right. That poor man should have been in a facility." Joan's hand found mine. "Val, breathe." But I couldn't breathe. Couldn't process what had just happened. My son had just used his father's funeral to publicly condemn my caregiving, to tell everyone assembled that I'd made the wrong choice, that Thomas had suffered because of me. The service ended. People filed past the casket, offered condolences to Anthony and Vanessa in the front row. Some glanced back at me, pity in their eyes, or maybe judgment. Hard to tell the difference sometimes. Pastor Williams approached me as people moved toward the reception hall. "Valerie, I'm sorry for your loss. Thomas was a good man." "Thank you, Pastor. I want you to know that what you did, caring for Thomas at home, that took tremendous love and sacrifice. Not everyone could have done that. Anthony doesn't think I should have done it at all." Pastor Williams sighed. "Anthony is grieving. And sometimes grief comes out as anger, as blame. Give him time." But time wasn't going to change the facts. Wasn't going to change that for the last year of Thomas's life, Anthony had barely visited. that every conversation had been an argument about facilities and professional care and why I was being stubborn, that my son had chosen his wife's professional opinion over his mother's devotion. The reception was in the church fellowship hall, tables with finger sandwiches and coffee, photos of Thomas on poster boards, pictures from before, Thomas in his postal uniform, Thomas holding baby Anthony, Thomas and me on our wedding day in 1985, both of us so young and certain that love would be enough. I stood near the back, holding a cup of coffee I wasn't drinking. People approached carefully, offered brief condolences before moving on to Anthony and Vanessa, who held court near the photo displays like receiving lines at a wedding. I watched Vanessa hug church members, watched her dab at her eyes with a tissue. She'd known Thomas for 8 years. I'd known him for 39. But somehow, she was the one everyone comforted, the devoted daughter-in-law who'd tried so hard to help, who'd cared enough to push for proper medical care. And I was the stubborn wife who'd isolated her husband, who'd kept him locked away, who'd refused help and made everything harder. That's what Vanessa had been telling people for 2 years. That's the narrative she'd built. And at his funeral, with Anthony's eulogy supporting her version, it became the official story. Mrs. Donovan? A woman I didn't recognize approached. Younger. Maybe 40. I'm sorry for your loss. I worked with Vanessa at the hospital. She's told me so much about your husband's situation. Has she? Yes. And I just want you to know that what you went through, trying to care for someone with advanced Alzheimer's at home, that must have been impossible. Vanessa said you refused all help. That must have been so hard for the family. I didn't refuse all help. I refused to put my husband in a facility. Right, but Vanessa said the doctors recommended memory care, that your husband needed specialized treatment you couldn't provide at home. My husband needed to be in his own house, with his own wife, not surrounded by strangers in a facility where he'd be even more confused. The woman's face showed polite disagreement. Well, I'm sure you did what you thought was best. Vanessa just wanted to make sure your husband got proper care. She walked away. I stood there holding my cold coffee, understanding fully what Vanessa had done. She'd spent 2 years building a case against me, telling her colleagues, probably telling Anthony's friends, telling people at church, painting me as the difficult mother-in-law who wouldn't listen to reason, who'd prioritized her own need for control over Thomas's well-being. And maybe she believed it. Vanessa was a social worker who specialized in elder care placement. She'd built her career on moving people with dementia into facilities. She genuinely believed that memory care units with their locked doors and structured activities and professional staff were the best option. She couldn't understand why I'd fought so hard to keep Thomas home, why I'd retired 2 years early from teaching, why I'd spent every day and night caring for a man who couldn't recognize me anymore, why I'd kept a promise I'd made 39 years ago at an altar in this same church. In sickness and in health, Joan found me again. Val, let's go. You don't need to stay here. I'm his widow. I should be here. You're exhausted. You've been caring for Thomas nonstop for 5 years. You've barely slept, barely eaten. You need to go home and rest. If I leave, Vanessa wins. This isn't about winning. Thomas is gone. There's nothing to win anymore. But she was wrong. There was something to win. There was the truth. The story of what really happened during those 5 years. Why I'd made the choices I'd made. What Thomas had actually wanted. Mrs. Donovan? A man in a dark suit approached, mid-50s, carrying a briefcase. I'm Daniel Jenkins. I'm the attorney handling your husband's estate. I wanted to express my condolences and remind you about our meeting next week, Tuesday at 10 a.m. I remember. Your son and daughter-in-law will be there as well. It's a straightforward estate. Your husband's will was very clear about his wishes. Vanessa appeared at Jenkins's elbow. Mr. Jenkins, thank you for coming. Anthony and I were just discussing the estate. Obviously, Valerie will inherit the house and Thomas's pension. But we wanted to make sure that certain medical costs are addressed. The care expenses from the last few years. Your mother-in-law and I can discuss that at the meeting, Jenkins said carefully. Of course. I just want to make sure everything is fair. That if there are medical debts from Thomas's care at home, those are handled appropriately. Medical debts. She was implying I'd mismanaged Thomas's care, run up bills that needed to be paid from the estate. There are no debts, I said quietly. I paid for everything as it happened. Thomas's care didn't create debt. Well, we'll see what the accounting shows, Vanessa said. Mr. Jenkins, we'll see you Tuesday. She walked away. Jenkins looked at me with something like sympathy. Mrs. Donovan, your husband's estate is in good order. The will is clear, and there's a letter he left. For the meeting, he wanted it read in front of you and your son. A letter. Thomas had left a letter. Written before the disease took his ability to write. Before he forgot how to form words. That night, I sat in the house that was too quiet. The hospital bed was still in our bedroom. I hadn't been able to call the medical supply company yet to pick it up. Thomas's wheelchair sat in the corner. His medications were still lined up on the bathroom counter, organized by time of day. A routine I'd followed religiously for 5 years. The house smelled like disinfectant and the lavender lotion I'd used on Thomas's skin to prevent bed sores. It smelled like sickness and caregiving and the slow death of everything we'd built together. Joan had stayed with me through the reception, then driven me home, made me tea I didn't drink, sat with me in silence because there were no words that helped. She'd left an hour ago after making me promise to call if I needed anything. But what I needed, she couldn't give me. I needed Thomas back. Not the Thomas from the last 2 years who couldn't speak or recognize me. The Thomas from before. The man who'd carried me over the threshold of this house in 1988. Who'd coached Anthony's Little League team. Who'd slow danced with me in the kitchen to old Marvin Gaye songs. That Thomas was gone. Had been gone for years, really. Alzheimer's takes people in pieces. First the recent memories, then the old ones, then language, then recognition, then everything that made them who they were. By the end, Thomas was a body I cared for. A body that sometimes looked at me with fear because he didn't know who I was or why I was touching him. But he was my body to care for. My husband. My promise. I thought about Anthony's eulogy, about his words. Sometimes love means letting go. Maybe he was right. Maybe I should have let go, let professionals take over. Let Thomas spend his final years in a memory care facility with trained staff and structured activities and other families visiting their own disappearing loved ones. But I'd made a different choice. And that choice had cost me my son. It started 2 years ago, fall of 2022. Thomas had been diagnosed for 3 years by then. The decline was accelerating. He was getting aggressive sometimes, confused, wandering at night. I'd had to install locks on the doors so he couldn't walk out in the middle of the night in his pajamas. Anthony and Vanessa came for Sunday dinner, a tradition we'd tried to maintain even as Thomas got worse. Vanessa had just started her new position at Northwestern Memorial Hospital, elder care social work. She was full of information about the latest dementia care programs. "Mom, we need to talk about Dad's care," Anthony said over pot roast, that Thomas couldn't eat anymore. I was feeding him pureed vegetables. He kept turning his head away like a toddler refusing dinner. "We're managing fine." "You're not managing. You're barely surviving. Look at you. When's the last time you slept a full night? When's the last time you left this house?" "I leave when I need to. Joan comes to sit with your father when I have errands." "That's not enough, Mrs. Donovan," Vanessa said. She'd stopped calling me Valerie a year earlier. It was always Mrs. Donovan now, formal, distant. "Thomas needs round-the-clock supervision, professional care. He's getting aggressive. What if he hurts you?" "He would never hurt me. He doesn't know who you are anymore. He hit you last week," Anthony told me. I looked at my son. He'd told her. I'd mentioned it in passing, explained that Thomas had been frightened, had lashed out, a bruise on my arm that had faded within days. But Anthony had reported it to Vanessa like evidence. It was an accident. He was confused. Exactly, Vanessa said. He's confused. And confusion in dementia patients can be dangerous, for them and for caregivers. There are excellent memory care facilities in Chicago. I can get you a list. Places that specialize in Alzheimer's. They have locked units so patients can't wander. Staff trained in de-escalation. Activities designed for cognitive stimulation. He doesn't need a locked unit. He needs his home. Mom, please. Anthony's voice was strained. Just visit one. Just see what they're like. Dad would have his own room. You could decorate it with family photos. You could visit every day. But trained staff would handle the hard parts, the bathing, the feeding, the nighttime wandering. I handle those parts. I'm his wife. You're exhausted. You retired early from teaching because you couldn't do both. You've given up everything for this. Your career, your friends, your life. And Dad doesn't even know who you are anymore. The words hung there. The truth neither of us wanted to say out loud. Thomas didn't know me. When he looked at me, he saw a stranger, sometimes a kind stranger who helped him, sometimes a frightening stranger who was trying to hurt him. But he was still my husband, still the man I'd promised to care for in sickness and in health. I appreciate your concern, I said carefully, but Thomas stays home. This is what he wanted. We talked about it years ago. Before he got really bad, he made me promise never to put him in a facility. That was before he understood what this disease would do, Vanessa said. Before he knew how bad it would get, Mrs. Donovan, I see this every day in my work. Families who wait too long, who try to do it all themselves, and by the time they finally accept help, the caregiver is sick too. You're 60 years old. You have high blood pressure. You're not sleeping. You're not eating properly. What happens when you collapse? Who takes care of Thomas then? That won't happen. It will. It's not a question of if, it's when. Anthony reached across the table, took my hand. Mom, please, let us help. Let us find a good place for Dad. A place where he'll be safe and you can actually rest. I pulled my hand away. No. Mom. I said no, Anthony. Your father stays home. End of discussion. We didn't speak for 3 weeks after that dinner. Then Vanessa called. Professional voice, social worker voice, Mrs. Donovan, I wanted to let you know that I've been consulting with Thomas's neurologist. Dr. Morrison agrees that facility placement would be in Thomas's best interest at this stage. Dr. Morrison doesn't make decisions about my husband's care. I do. Actually, as Thomas's dementia has progressed, there are legal considerations. If he's been deemed incompetent, are you threatening me? I'm informing you of options. Anthony and I have been researching guardianship. In cases where a patient can't make decisions and the primary caregiver isn't providing adequate care, I provide round-the-clock care. I do everything for him. Isolated home care without professional support isn't adequate. Not at this stage. Mrs. Donovan, I'm trying to help. If you won't voluntarily place Thomas in appropriate care, we may need to pursue legal guardianship. I hung up, sat in my empty kitchen, and understood that my daughter-in-law was threatening to take my husband away from me. Tuesday morning arrived too fast. The estate meeting. I dressed carefully in a navy dress, the same one I'd worn to Thomas's funeral. It felt wrong wearing it again so soon, but everything in my closet felt wrong. Nothing was appropriate for the occasion of dividing up your dead husband's life. Jenkins & Associates was in a downtown office building. Glass and steel. The kind of place that felt impersonal and cold. Joan offered to come with me, but I told her no. This was something I needed to do alone. Anthony and Vanessa were already there when I arrived. sitting in the waiting room. Anthony stood when he saw me. "Mom." "Anthony." Vanessa stayed seated, offered a tight smile. "Mrs. Donovan, how are you holding up?" "I'm managing." "Of course. It must be strange having the house to yourself after so many years of constant caregiving." There was something in her tone. Not quite sympathy, something sharper, like she was reminding me that my role was over, that I was no longer Thomas's caregiver, just his widow. Daniel Jenkins emerged from an inner office. "The Donovan family. Thank you for coming. Please, follow me." His office was smaller than I expected. Bookshelves lined with legal texts, a desk covered in neat folders, 3 chairs arranged in front of it. Jenkins gestured for us to sit. "Let me begin by saying again how sorry I am for your loss. Thomas was a good man. He came to me 5 years ago to update his will after his diagnosis. He wanted to make sure everything was in order." 5 years ago? Vanessa leaned forward. That was 2019, right after his diagnosis, before the disease progressed. Yes, Thomas was still quite lucid when he made these arrangements. He knew exactly what he wanted. Jenkins opened a folder. The estate is straightforward. The house in Auburn Gresham, valued at approximately $385,000, goes entirely to Valerie. Thomas's life insurance policy of $150,000 also goes to Valerie. His pension from the Postal Service continues as a survivor benefit. His savings and investment accounts, totaling approximately $95,000, go to Valerie. "Everything goes to Mom?" Anthony said. "Nothing for... that's fine. I wasn't expecting. I just thought maybe there'd be something set aside." "Your father wanted to ensure your mother was financially secure," Jenkins said gently. "Given that she retired early from teaching to care for him, the house, the insurance, the savings, all of it goes to Valerie. It's standard for a spouse to inherit the estate." Vanessa's jaw tightened. "And the medical expenses from the last 5 years? Were those properly tracked?" "There were no unusual expenses. Thomas's care at home was covered by Medicare and his insurance. Out-of-pocket costs were minimal and paid from joint accounts as they occurred." "But surely, if Thomas had been in professional care, a memory care facility, there would have been different expenses, perhaps more cost-effective." "Vanessa, stop." Anthony's voice was strained. "This isn't about the money. I'm just making sure everything is accounted for properly." Jenkins closed the first folder, opened another. "There's one more item. Thomas left a letter. He requested that it be read aloud at this meeting, in front of both Valerie and Anthony." My heart stopped. "A letter?" Thomas had left me a letter. "He wrote this 5 years ago," Jenkins continued, "shortly after his diagnosis. He gave it to me with specific instructions to read it after his death, in the presence of his wife and son." Jenkins pulled out several typed pages. Thomas's words. From before, from when he could still write, still think clearly, still knew what was coming. "I'll read it now," Jenkins said. He cleared his throat. "My name is Thomas Donovan. I'm writing this in May 2019. I've just been diagnosed with early-onset Alzheimer's disease. I'm 59 years old. The doctors tell me I have maybe 5 to 7 years before the disease takes everything. My memories, my ability to speak, eventually, my ability to recognize my own family." Anthony's hand gripped the armrest. "I couldn't move, couldn't breathe." Jenkins continued. "I'm writing this letter because I know what's coming. I know there will be decisions to make about my care, and I know those decisions will tear my family apart. I've seen it happen to other families at the support group I just started attending. The spouse wants to keep the patient at home. The adult children want facility placement. Everyone thinks they're right. Everyone thinks they're acting out of love. So I want to make my wishes clear now, while I still can. While I can still think and reason and understand what I'm asking. Valerie, my wife of 34 years, I want you to keep me at home. I know what I'm asking. I know how hard it will be. I've done the research. I understand that Alzheimer's care is exhausting, that you'll give up your career, your social life, your sleep, your health. I know what this disease will do to me, and to you. I felt tears on my face, couldn't stop them, but I don't want to die in a facility surrounded by strangers. I want to die in our home, in our bed, with you beside me, even if I don't know who you are anymore. That's my wish. That's what I'm asking you to do. And I know you'll keep this promise, because you've never broken a promise to me in 34 years. Anthony, my son, I know you'll want to help. I know you'll see your mother exhausting herself, and you'll want to fix it. You'll want to move me to a nice facility with professional staff. You'll think that's the loving thing to do. And maybe it would be easier. Maybe it would be more practical. But it's not what I want. I need you to support your mother's decision to keep me home. I need you to trust that she knows what she's doing. That this is hard for her, but it's what I asked for. Don't fight her on this. Don't make her caregiving years even harder by arguing about where I should be. Please. Anthony was crying now, silent tears running down his face. To anyone else involved in my care, any family members or in-laws or well-meaning friends who think they know what's best, this is my choice. Made while I'm still competent, while I can still legally make decisions. I choose home care. I choose my wife. I choose to die in the house where I lived for 36 years. Valerie, I love you. Thank you for keeping this promise. Thank you for the sacrifice I know you're making. And please, when I'm gone, forgive Anthony if he fought you on this. Forgive anyone who questioned your choices. They meant well, even if they were wrong. Jenkins set down the letter. The office was silent, except for the sound of Anthony crying. Vanessa's face had gone pale. She stared at Jenkins like he'd just spoken in a foreign language. That letter was written 5 years ago, before Thomas understood how bad the disease would get, before he knew what he was asking. The letter is legally binding as a statement of wishes, Jenkins said quietly. Thomas was fully competent when he wrote it. He understood exactly what he was asking. But things changed, Vanessa insisted. The disease progressed faster than anyone expected. He became violent, confused. He needed professional care that Mrs. Donovan couldn't provide alone. He needed what his wife provided, Jenkins said, which was exactly what he asked for. Anthony wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. Mom, I didn't know. I didn't know Dad had written this. You never told me. I didn't know either, I said. My voice shook. Thomas never told me about the letter. He just made me promise to keep him home. I thought it was just between us. He wanted it read after his death, Jenkins explained. He knew there would be conflict during his illness. He hoped this letter would provide clarity afterward, would help the family understand his choices. Vanessa stood abruptly. This doesn't change what happened. Mrs. Donovan isolated Thomas. She refused help from family. She refused to let us visit in the final year. Because every visit became a fight, I said. Every time you came to the house, you criticized. You told Thomas he'd be better off in a facility. You upset him. He'd be agitated for days after you left. We were trying to help. You were trying to prove I was incompetent, so you could take guardianship, so you could move Thomas to a facility against his wishes. Against what we thought was best for him, Vanessa corrected. As a social worker who specializes in dementia care, I know what proper treatment looks like. And isolated home care with no professional support, isn't it? But it's what Thomas wanted, Anthony said quietly. Dad wrote it down, made it clear. He wanted to stay home. He didn't know what he was asking, Vanessa repeated. He didn't understand the burden, the danger, the reality of what that kind of care requires. Jenkins cleared his throat. There's more to the letter. A second section. Thomas anticipated this conversation. He picked up the pages again. This next part is addressed to anyone who questioned Valerie's caregiving. I'll read it. I know some people will think Valerie made the wrong choice, that she should have put me in a facility, that home care was selfish or impractical or dangerous. I want to address those concerns directly. Yes, home care will be hard. Probably the hardest thing Valerie ever does, but it's also the greatest gift she can give me. The gift of dying in familiar surroundings, of being cared for by hands that have touched me with love for decades, of not spending my final years confused and frightened in a place I don't recognize, cared for by strangers I don't know. Some will say Valerie isolated me, that she kept family away. If that happens, it's because the visits became too difficult, because people who came to help actually made things harder, because arguments about my care added stress to an already impossible situation. If Valerie limits visits, trust that she has good reason, that she's protecting me, not isolating me. Some will say she should have accepted professional help, respite care, home health aides. Maybe she should have, but I also know my wife. I know her pride, her need to keep promises, her inability to delegate when it comes to people she loves. If she tries to do too much alone, that's not a failing. That's love pushed to its breaking point. Be patient with her. Don't judge her for coping the only way she knows how. Vanessa's hands were shaking. She sat back down heavily. Anthony, this is especially for you. I know watching your mother care for me will be hard. You'll see her exhaust herself. You'll worry about her health. You'll want to fix things, to make it easier. And your wife, being a professional in this field, will have strong opinions about what should be done. Listen to those opinions, consider them, but ultimately, respect your mother's choice to honor my wishes. Don't let professional expertise override personal knowledge. Vanessa doesn't know me the way your mother does. She doesn't know our history, our promises, what we mean to each other. If you and your mother have conflict over my care, please try to see it from her perspective. She's not being stubborn to be difficult. She's keeping a promise to a man she's loved for nearly 4 decades. That's not something you can understand until you've been married that long yourself. And Vanessa, since I know you'll be involved in these decisions, thank you for caring about my well-being. Thank you for wanting to help, but please understand that there are different kinds of care. Professional care is one kind. The care of a devoted spouse is another. Both have value, both have place. But I've chosen the care of my wife. Please respect that choice, even if it's not the choice you would make professionally. Jenkins set down the letter again. The final paragraph is personal, for Valerie only. He looked at me. Would you like me to read it aloud, or would you prefer to read it privately? Aloud, I whispered. Please. Jenkins nodded. Valerie, my love, if you're hearing this, it means I'm gone. It means you kept your promise. It means you carried me through to the end. I know what that cost you. Your career, your health, your relationship with our son, maybe even your sense of who you are beyond being my caregiver. I'm sorry for what I asked, sorry for the burden, but I'm not sorry for the choice. You gave me the gift of dying at home, loved and cared for, even when I couldn't remember your name. That's everything. That's more than most people get. Now I need you to make a new promise. Promise me you'll live again. Really live. Not just exist in the empty house where you cared for me. Find purpose beyond caregiving. Reconnect with Joan. Make new friends. Maybe even help other caregivers who are going through what you went through. You have so much to offer. So much wisdom earned through the hardest years of your life. And forgive Anthony. Forgive Vanessa. They meant well, even if they were wrong. Don't let my illness and death destroy what's left of our family. You're 62 years old. You have decades left. Don't spend them alone and angry. Spend them living the life I can't anymore. for both of us. I love you, Valerie Donovan, always have, always will. Thank you for 39 years. Thank you for keeping your promise. Now keep this last one, Liv. The silence in Jenkins's office was complete. I couldn't look at Anthony, couldn't look at Vanessa, could only stare at the letter in Jenkins's hands. Thomas's final words, written 5 years ago when he still knew who he was, when he could still anticipate what was coming. He'd known there would be conflict, known Vanessa would push for facility care, known Anthony would be caught in the middle, and he'd tried to prevent it. Tried to make his wishes so clear that no one could argue. But they'd argued anyway. Mrs. Donovan, Vanessa said finally. Her voice was different. Smaller. I didn't. I thought I was helping. I genuinely believed Thomas needed professional care. That home care at that stage was inadequate. You thought I was inadequate. Yes, she looked down at her hands. I thought you were letting pride and stubbornness harm Thomas. That you couldn't accept that you needed help. I see it all the time in my work. Family members who try to do too much, who refuse to admit they're overwhelmed. I thought you were one of those cases. I was overwhelmed, every single day. But that's what Thomas asked me to do. I know that now. Vanessa's eyes were red. The letter makes it clear. But for 2 years I truly believed I was advocating for Thomas's best interest. I thought the guardianship petition was the right thing to do. You tried to take my husband away from me. I tried to get him proper care. There's a difference. Not to me. There isn't. Anthony spoke for the first time since the letter ended. Mom, I'm sorry. I should have asked you more questions. Should have asked if Dad had made his wishes clear. I saw you exhausting yourself and I thought Vanessa was right. She's the professional. She knows about these things. She knows about dementia care in general. She didn't know about Thomas specifically, about what he wanted, what we'd promised each other. I know, and I'm sorry I didn't trust you. Didn't trust that you knew what you were doing. I didn't always know what I was doing, I admitted. There were days I thought I was losing my mind. Days I wondered if you and Vanessa were right, if Thomas would be better off in a facility with trained staff and structured activities. Why didn't you tell us that? Anthony asked. Why didn't you let us help? Because every offer of help came with judgment. Every conversation turned into an argument about facilities. I couldn't accept help from people who thought I was making the wrong choice, who thought I was harming Thomas by keeping my promise. Vanessa wiped her eyes. I judged you. I admit that. I looked at your situation through my professional lens and decided you were a difficult caregiver who needed intervention. I didn't see the love, the devotion, the promise you were keeping. You saw an exhausted 60-year-old woman trying to care for a patient with advanced Alzheimer's. You saw someone who needed help but wouldn't accept it. Professionally, you were right to be concerned. But personally, I was wrong to push so hard, to threaten guardianship, to try to force you into decisions Thomas had explicitly rejected. Jenkins cleared his throat gently. The estate business is concluded. The will is clear. Valerie inherits everything, as is standard for surviving spouses. The letter provides context for Thomas's wishes regarding his care. There's nothing more to settle legally. Thank you, I said quietly. We stood to leave. Anthony hesitated at the door. Mom, can we talk? Just the two of us? I looked at Vanessa. She nodded. I'll wait in the car. Take your time. After she left, Anthony and I stood in the hallway outside Jenkins's office. My son, 39 years old, looking at me with Thomas's eyes, seeing me maybe for the first time in 2 years. I don't know how to fix this, he said. How to fix us? I said terrible things at Dad's funeral. Blamed you publicly for choices Dad explicitly asked you to make. I chose Vanessa's professional opinion over your knowledge of your own husband. You were trying to help your father, trying to protect me. Those aren't terrible motivations. But the outcome was terrible. I stopped visiting, stopped calling, made your last year with Dad even harder because every interaction was a fight. Yes, you did. Can you forgive me? I thought about Thomas's final words. Forgive Anthony. Don't let my illness destroy what's left of our family. I don't know yet. Maybe, eventually, but not today. That's fair. Anthony's voice cracked. I'll wait, however long it takes. Mom, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. 3 months after Thomas's funeral, I woke up in an empty house and didn't know what to do with myself. The hospital bed was gone, the medications disposed of, the wheelchair donated. I'd erased all the physical evidence of caregiving, but I couldn't erase the routine. I still woke at 2 a.m. to check on Thomas, still listened for sounds of distress, still prepared breakfast for 2 before remembering I was eating alone. 5 years of caregiving had rewired my brain. My body knew how to care for someone. It didn't know how to care for myself. Joan called every week. Val, you need to get out of that house. Join a book club. Take a class. Something. I'm fine. You're not fine. You're stuck. You did your job. You kept your promise. Now you need to figure out who Valerie is without Thomas to care for. But I didn't know who that person was anymore. I'd been a teacher for 32 years. Then, a caregiver for 5. I'd defined myself by taking care of others, students, husband. Now I was just a 62-year-old widow living in a too-big house with no purpose. The money from Thomas's life insurance sat in my account. $150,000. I didn't need and didn't want. Blood money. The price of my husband's life calculated by an insurance company. I couldn't spend it, couldn't look at it without feeling sick. Anthony called twice in those 3 months. Brief conversations. How are you doing? I'm okay. How's work? It's fine. Neither of us knew how to bridge the gap between us. Neither of us knew if it was even possible. Then one Tuesday in June, he called and said, Mom, Vanessa and I are separating. I sat down heavily on the couch. What? We're getting a trial separation, maybe divorce. We haven't decided yet, but we need space from each other. The whole thing with Dad, it broke something between us. Anthony, I'm sorry. Don't be. This isn't your fault. It's mine and Vanessa's. We let professional disagreement destroy personal boundaries. She couldn't separate being my wife from being a social worker with opinions about my father's care. And I couldn't separate being your son from being her husband, who should have supported her. Where are you staying? I got an apartment in Oak Park. Small, 1 bedroom. It's weird living alone after 8 years of marriage. I'm remembering what it's like to be just myself. I know that feeling. Yeah. He was quiet for a moment. Mom, I've been seeing a therapist since Dad died, trying to process everything. The grief, the guilt, what I said at the funeral. That's good. She suggested something, asked if you'd be willing to do a family session, just you and me, to talk about what happened, to try to, I don't know, start over maybe. I thought about Thomas's letter. Don't let my illness destroy what's left of our family. Okay. Really? Really? Tell me when and where. The family therapy session was in a small office in downtown Chicago. Dr. Sarah Chen. No relation to Vanessa, Anthony assured me. She was maybe 50. Kind eyes. The kind of person who listened more than she talked. I'm glad you both came, she said after introductions. Anthony has shared some of what happened during Thomas's illness. I thought today we could create space for both of you to tell your stories. Valerie, would you like to start? So I told it. The 5 years. The diagnosis in 2019, when Thomas was only 59, the rapid decline. The decision to retire early from teaching. The 24-hour caregiving. The exhaustion. The isolation. The promise I'd made and refused to break even when it cost me everything. I told her about Vanessa's concerns, the guardianship threat, the arguments every visit. The final year when Anthony stopped coming because every conversation ended in fights about facilities and professional care and my stubborn refusal to listen. I understand why they were concerned, I said. I was exhausted. I was isolated. I probably looked like exactly the kind of caregiver who needs intervention. But Thomas had asked me to keep him home. I couldn't break that promise. Even when it damaged your relationship with your son? Dr. Chen asked gently. Even then, Thomas was dying. Anthony wasn't. I thought I could fix things with Anthony after Thomas was gone, after the caregiving was over. I thought we'd have time. And now? Now I don't know if the damage is fixable. Dr. Chen turned to Anthony. What do you want from your relationship with your mother? I want to understand her. Why she made the choices she made. Why she shut me out. Why my offers to help felt like attacks to her. They felt like attacks because they were attacks, I said. Every offer came with criticism, with judgment. You didn't say, "How can I support you in caring for Dad at home?" You said, "You need to put Dad in a facility." There's a difference. Because I genuinely believed facility care was better. Based on what Vanessa told you, based on professional guidelines, not based on what your father wanted, not based on knowing Thomas the way I knew him. I knew Dad. You knew him before. You didn't know him during. You weren't there for the hard parts, Anthony. The nights he screamed because he didn't know where he was. The days he looked at me with fear because he didn't recognize me. The moments of clarity when he'd grab my hand and beg me not to send him away. You didn't see those moments. You saw the statistics, the professional recommendations, the social worker's assessment. Because you wouldn't let me see anything else. You shut me out, Mom. Stopped inviting me to doctor's appointments, stopped updating me on Dad's condition, made it clear my presence wasn't welcome unless I agreed with your decisions. He was right. I had shut him out. Not intentionally, not maliciously, but I had. Every visit had become so exhausting, so full of conflict. It had been easier to stop inviting him. Easier to handle everything alone than to constantly defend my choices. I'm sorry, I said. I'm sorry I shut you out. Sorry I made it impossible for you to help. Sorry I let Vanessa's concerns turn into a war instead of a conversation. I'm sorry too, Anthony said. Sorry I stopped trusting you. Sorry I believed a professional opinion over your decades of knowing Dad. Sorry I said what I said at the funeral. Dr. Chen watched us both. What you're both describing is a common dynamic in family caregiving. Two people who love the same person, both trying to do right by them, but with completely different ideas about what right looks like. The caregiver feels attacked and unsupported. The family member feels shut out and worried. Neither person is wrong, but neither person can see the other's perspective because the stakes are too high. We did 6 more sessions over the next 3 months. Some were easier than others. Some ended with both of us crying. Some ended with careful hope. Slowly, we began to understand each other. Not forgive completely, not erase what happened, but understand. Anthony told me what it was like watching me disappear into caregiving. How he'd call and I'd sound exhausted, barely able to string sentences together. How he'd visit and see the house falling apart. Dishes piled in the sink. Laundry unfolded. Me in the same clothes I'd worn the day before because I hadn't had time to shower. "I thought you were drowning," he said during our 4th session. "And I kept throwing you life preservers and you kept refusing them. It was terrifying to watch. I was drowning. But the life preservers you were throwing would have meant breaking my promise to your father. I couldn't grab them without letting go of him. I understand that now. I didn't then. I told him what it was like to be judged, to have every choice questioned, To feel like everyone thought I was failing when I was actually keeping the most important promise of my life. Vanessa would come to the house, and her eyes would catalog everything wrong. Thomas's uncombed hair, the medication bottles on the counter, the wheelchair parked in the living room. She'd make suggestions that sounded helpful, but felt like accusations. Have you considered adult day programs? Have you looked into respite care? Like I hadn't already researched everything. Like I was just being stubborn instead of following your father's explicit wishes. She was trying to help. She was trying to fix a situation that couldn't be fixed. Your father was dying. There was no good outcome, no perfect solution, just hard choices and different kinds of suffering. I chose the suffering Thomas asked for. Home, family, familiar hands caring for him. Vanessa wanted the suffering that looked more manageable on paper: facility care, professional staff, structured environment. Were you ever tempted, Anthony asked, to just give up? Put Dad in a facility like Vanessa wanted? I thought about it carefully before answering. Yes. God. Yes. There were days I thought I couldn't do one more night. One more diaper change. One more meal where he forgot how to swallow. Days I looked at those facility brochures. Vanessa kept leaving and thought, maybe she was right. Maybe this was too much for one person. Why didn't you? Because I'd look at your father, really look at him, and I'd remember the man he'd been, the promises we'd made. And I knew if the situation were reversed, if I were the one with Alzheimer's, Thomas would have kept me home, would have cared for me no matter how hard it got. I couldn't give him less than what he would have given me. Doctor, Chen asked me during our 5th session, Valerie, do you have regrets about your caregiving choices? Yes and no. I don't regret keeping Thomas home. That was what he wanted, and I honored that. But I regret how I handled the conflict with Anthony and Vanessa. I could have been less defensive. Could have let them help in ways that didn't compromise Thomas's wishes. Could have kept communication open instead of shutting everyone out. What would that have looked like? Maybe letting Anthony visit more without making it a battlefield, accepting respite care so I could rest even if Thomas stayed at home, letting Vanessa share her professional knowledge without feeling attacked by it. I was so focused on protecting Thomas's choice that I stopped seeing how my methods were hurting people I loved. That's insight that only comes with distance, Dr. Chen said. You were in survival mode. People in survival mode can't always see the bigger picture. Anthony and I started having coffee once a month, neutral territory, a cafe halfway between Auburn Gresham and Oak Park. We'd sit and talk about safe things at first. His work, my attempts to figure out retirement, Joan's health, the weather. But slowly, we started talking about harder things. His divorce from Vanessa. They'd decided to make it permanent. She'd taken a job in Boston, a fresh start away from the memories and the conflict. Anthony said it was amicable, said they both understood the marriage had been damaged beyond repair. Do you blame me? I asked. For what? The divorce? For the conflict that led to it? No, Mom. Vanessa and I made our own choices. We let professional opinion override personal boundaries. We let a disagreement about Dad's care become bigger than our marriage. That's on us, not you. I told him about my own struggles, the empty house, the purposeless days, the $150,000 life insurance money I couldn't spend because it felt wrong. Joan had suggested I donate it, use it for something meaningful, but I didn't know what. What would Dad want you to do with it? Anthony asked. He'd want me to live. That's what his letter said. Find purpose, help others, live the life he can't anymore. So do that. I don't know how. Anthony stirred his coffee. You know what Vanessa told me once? Before everything fell apart? She said you would have made an excellent advocate for family caregivers, that you understood the experience in a way most social workers never could, that if you'd been willing to share your knowledge, instead of keeping it all private. You could have helped a lot of people." She said that? Yeah. She respected your dedication, even when she disagreed with your methods. She thought you were wasting your expertise by isolating yourself. I thought about that conversation for days. Then I called Joan. You know those caregiver support groups you kept telling me about? The ones I was too stubborn to join when I was caring for Thomas? Do they need volunteers? Joan was quiet for a moment. Val, are you sure? It might be hard, triggering, being around people going through what you just went through. Maybe that's exactly why I should do it. Thomas's letter said to help other caregivers. To use what I learned, I spent 5 years learning how to care for someone with Alzheimer's. Maybe that knowledge shouldn't just sit in my head gathering dust. I'll make some calls. 2 weeks later, I attended an orientation at the Alzheimer's Association Chicago chapter. The coordinator was a woman named Patricia. Kind face, professional but warm. We have several volunteer opportunities, she explained. Support group facilitation, phone support for new caregivers, educational presentations. What interests you? I want to help people who are where I was, exhausted, isolated, feeling judged for their choices. People who need someone to say, "You're doing okay. This is hard, but you're not failing." Patricia smiled. We need more volunteers like you, people who've lived it. How do you feel about phone support? We get calls from caregivers in crisis. They need someone who understands, who won't judge, who can listen and validate without trying to fix everything. I can do that. 9 months after Thomas's funeral, I stood at his grave on a cold December morning. The headstone was simple: Thomas Donovan, beloved husband and father, 1960 to 2024. Below that, words I'd chosen. He lived with dignity. He died at home. Hey, baby, I said softly. It's been a year since you left. 9 months since the funeral where Anthony said those things. Since your letter changed everything. A cardinal landed on the headstone, bright red against gray granite. Thomas had always loved cardinals, said they were good luck. I'm doing what you asked. Living again. It's hard. Some days I still wake up expecting to care for you, still listen for sounds that aren't there, but I'm trying. The volunteer work with the Alzheimer's Association had become my purpose. 3 times a week, I answered calls from caregivers in crisis. People who sounded exactly like I had. Exhausted. Desperate. Convinced they were failing. I didn't tell them what to choose. Didn't say home care or facility care was better, just listened, validated, told them the truth. This is the hardest thing you'll ever do. There's no perfect choice. Just the choice you can live with. And whatever you choose, you're not failing. You're loving someone through the worst thing that can happen to them. Last week, a woman called sobbing. Her husband had early onset Alzheimer's. Her adult children wanted facility placement. She wanted to keep him home. Am I being selfish? She asked. My daughter says I'm making this harder than it needs to be. I told her about Thomas, about his letter, about the 5 years and the conflict and the promise I'd kept. If your husband has made his wishes clear, honor them, but also know that honoring them will cost you. Your health, your relationships, your sense of who you are beyond caregiver. You have to decide if you can pay that price. Did you regret it? She asked. Keeping your husband home? I regret how I handled the conflict with my family, but I don't regret keeping my promise, he asked. I delivered. When I visit his grave, I can tell him I did what he asked. That's worth something. She thanked me. Said I was the first person who'd validated her choice without judgment. 3 days later, she called back. Said she'd decided to keep her husband home. But she was also accepting respite care, setting boundaries with her children, taking care of herself while taking care of him. You helped me see I can honor his wishes without destroying myself, she said. That's when I understood what Thomas's letter had asked for. Not perfect caregiving, not martyrdom, just doing my best while also living. Finding balance I'd never managed when he was alive, but could help others find now. Anthony and I had dinner last week. Monthly dinners had become our routine. We'd never be what we were before. The damage was too deep. But we were building something new. Something honest. "How's the volunteer work?" he asked. "Good. Hard sometimes. I talk to people going through exactly what I went through. Sometimes I see myself in them. The stubbornness, the isolation, the refusal to accept help. Do you tell them to do it differently than you did?" I tell them to honor their loved ones' wishes, but also to accept help, to keep family relationships open, to not make the same mistakes I made. "You kept Dad's promise." That wasn't a mistake. "No, but shutting you out was. I could have kept Dad home and still let you be part of his care. Those things weren't mutually exclusive. I just couldn't see it at the time." Anthony was quiet for a moment. "I'm seeing someone. Dating, I mean. Her name is Lisa. She's a teacher. Divorced. No kids." "That's good, Anthony. I'm happy for you. Would you want to meet her?" "Eventually, when things are more serious. I wanted to make sure that would be okay." "Of course it's okay. You're allowed to move forward with your life. So are you, Mom? Have you thought about, I don't know, travel, classes, dating even?" I laughed. I'm 62 years old and just learned how to live alone after 5 years of constant caregiving. I'm not ready for dating, but maybe someday? Maybe someday. Right now, I'm figuring out who Valerie is without Thomas. That's enough. I used some of Thomas's life insurance money to fund a scholarship, the Thomas Donovan Caregiver Support Fund. It helps family caregivers pay for respite care, for home health aides, for the support I was too proud to accept when I needed it. Joan said Thomas would be proud, that using his death benefit to help other caregivers was exactly what he'd want. I hoped she was right. The cardinal flew away from Thomas's headstone. I watched it disappear into bare winter trees. "I miss you," I told him. Miss the you from before. The man who danced with me in the kitchen, who coached Anthony's Little League team, who promised me forever. That's the Thomas I'm choosing to remember now, not the disease, not the hard years, just us, before. I touched the cold granite. Thank you for the letter, for understanding what would happen, for trying to fix it, even after you were gone. It worked. Mostly. Anthony and I are talking. We'll probably never be completely okay, but we're honest now. That's worth something. A year ago, I thought my life was over, that losing Thomas meant losing everything. But I was wrong. I lost my husband. I lost my role as caregiver. I damaged my relationship with my son. But I kept my promise, and I'm learning to live with the cost of that promise. That is Valerie Donovan's story. Now I want to hear from you. Where are you watching this from? What city? What country? Drop it in the comments below. I love seeing our global community come together over these powerful stories about caregiving, family conflict, and the impossible choices between keeping promises and maintaining relationships. Real question. If you were Valerie, what would you have done? Would you have kept Thomas at home like she did, even knowing it would destroy your relationship with your son? Would you have accepted facility placement to keep peace with Anthony and Vanessa, or would you have found some middle ground? Tell me in the comments. Hit that like button if this story made you feel something. Share it if you know someone caring for a loved one with Alzheimer's or dementia. Someone whose family is fighting about the right way to provide care. Someone caught between professional advice and personal promises. Someone exhausting themselves because they refuse to break a vow. And subscribe for more raw, real stories about family caregiving, the cost of keeping promises, adult children who question their parents' choices, and what happens when love looks different to different people in the same family. Thanks for watching. Sometimes, keeping promises costs you relationships. Sometimes doing what someone asks means losing everyone else. Sometimes, the people who love you most can't understand the choices you make for someone else. And sometimes honoring one person's wishes means accepting that others will never forgive you for it. See you in the next video.